Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of AACRAO's Credential Chats. This week, we are joined by Chris Huang. He is the Vice President for Academic Systems and Completion Strategy at Ivy Tech Community College. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, I know that before we went live, our AACRAO colleague Paige was saying one of the things she was excited about was just some of the realness that you're going to bring to this interview here. And just you had kind of previewed this by that we might end up titling this "Building the Plane While It Flies." And so I think that's maybe a great place to jump in is tell us kind of just what's going on with the credential innovation strategy at Ivy Tech Community College that you're allowed to share with us.
Sure. Well, I started at Ivy Tech in November of last year, and the last few years, they've socialized micro-credentials through the workforce and skills training side, um, defining what it is, which is with non-course credit, and skills training for those who don't know are just non-credit courses. They don't always have to run the same length of as a semester. And then just defining what a micro-credential is, verified skills, and so forth. And then we'll be using Canvas Credential to issue those badges, right? The visual representation of them. And we have a pilot this summer from a grant with Eli Lilly, who is helping to move the needle on early childhood educators. There's a shortage of those in our state, and I think also nationally. So they've created this program of kind of six pathways to get a credential, and then hopefully that will crosswalk to academic credit so that people can start their technical certificate or associate's degrees in early childhood. So yeah, we're literally
Wow.
kind of building the plane as we're flying it.
Well, and to have that kind of support, and I think we've all heard of that funder, and so that's just really exciting. Um, and it just raises so many questions for me. But the first place I want to start at is you use the word socialized. And I think that's really interesting because, we when the Office of the Registrar, change management can be one of our special, superpowers. And, when we think about change management and the heavy lifts and oftentimes expensive lifts, socialization is one of those things that, the expense is really about time. And you're the first person we've had bring use that word on this show, I think, in all the seasons we've done. So maybe just I'd love for you to start there as you think of that change management. When you talk about on the non-credit side of the house, socializing micro-credentials, what does that look like for you?
Well, I should give credit to Kathy Huffman, who was the person who was spearheading this before she left the and retired in April of this year. So we kind of crossed paths a little bit, but she did a lot of presentations. There's at Ivy Tech, we call it an impact process where you present an idea and then in front of different stakeholders, IT, cabinet, chancellors, academic affairs. We have different committees or councils, chief academic officers, chief student affairs officers. They had a couple of, I think they called it badge summits, not to borrow from University of Colorado or whatever, but just different ones to kind of socialize this idea. Also leveraging the Techonomy report that says that there's a need for, I think, 82,000 Hoosiers that need to be upskilled, reskilled each year. And so just piggybacking those things and work, there was a committee that kind of like a task force that was putting together the nuts and bolts of what is a micro-credential and all the different things that need to go with it. And so a lot of the work that had already been done by the time I came on board, but the question that kind of loomed was like, well, who's responsible for ultimately issuing the credential, right? And so AACRAO, yourself are very much in the sphere of that's the registrar's domain, and I oversee the college registrar's office. So with new initiatives and completion strategy in my portfolio, this kind of well, not fell into my lap per se. I knew about it coming in, but just to help kind of bring it to the crossing the finish line, so to speak.
Yeah, and for folks who don't know, as Christio pointed out there with the Hoosiers, he's in Indiana, and you all just statewide have a real reputation for leadership as folks are, diving into this space whether you're watching this, right when it comes out later this year in 2026, if you want to you're in a place where you're just trying to make sense of this space, badges, CLR, LER, wallets. You definitely look to the leadership in Indiana. The Indiana Achievement Wallet is one that a lot of people are looking at, and I know Ivy Tech was just so much in the forefront of that. Chris, I want to go back to when you talked about that there was a task force, there was a report about just definitions, and we had a report based off a member survey for AACRAO a couple years ago that we ended up calling the name of the report was Credential Confusion because of just what are there's all these words and acronyms and we can't even agree on even words we've heard of in regular English like badge might not have the same meaning from campus to campus or even school to school within a campus. And so what has that been like as you build the plane while flying, as you say, at Ivy Tech?
Yeah, for us, there is some confusion, even internally throughout the system of what is a micro-credential versus what is a badge. And for us, again, micro-credentials is definitely on the skills training workforce side of the house. It's non-credit courses. For us, badges are a visual representation of that credential. However, some people have a different associated with sometimes a certificate that we might issue because when we submit we do digital credentials in terms of an electronic degree or certificate through our vendor's parchment. But again, the micro credential will be issued through Canvas credentials, so a different vendor altogether. And where that will be displayed. Um, we don't have a wallet right now, but that could be something in the future that we explore.
And has there been any, as I mean, with I think you called impact conversations, as you explore different impacts, could you preview for us any kind of things that we might anticipate around campus of where there could be impact about words mattering?
Um, well, yeah, amongst I think deans and faculty, for sure, students as well. That's where I think it's important for us to all be on the same page. And again, that's kind of the part of the socialization because this is a new era for Ivy Tech. We've historically issued certificates, technical certificates, and associate's degrees. So this is a brand new area for us to kind of delve into and into the world of micro credentials and digital credentials and so forth. So um, yeah,
You mentioned, Chris, something that was really interesting that with this grant-funded non-credit micro-credential pilot, taking 6 credentials to help people, acquire the skills to level up to meet this really urgent need of early childhood, educators in your community, that you foresee it going to a place down the road of potentially being valued on the for-credit side of the house. And I'm really curious as what those conversations have been like because I think we're starting to see that nationally. That is a real trend. And in my perception, it feels like the 2 years are really leading the way on just innovation and implementation on that, and really just special ways that are impacting learners. And I think that some people might say, "Well, coming from the AACRAO side of the house, Chris seems very comfortable with that statement of down the road, how might we view these?" And so, what is it that at Ivy Tech that you're looking at some of these non-credit things on that side of the house being down the road stuff that helps people with a new on ramp to the college as as a degree seeking learner?
sure. Well, I think it's just about pathways, right? I mean, there's so many different ways to get a credential. And so I think we're just trying to be innovative but also agile because not everybody's going to come in through the academic door, let's say, right? And with our state the way it is with a very heavy manufacturing presence, and as part of the economy, the workforce, the skills training, I think that's a pathway that we need to um, have accessible for people because again, if there's so many different pathways now, I feel like before when I went to college, traditional pathway was basically, you start at your institution, you finish, not many people transferred, but nowadays, transfer credit, learning mobility is really a thing, right? And so I think just being able to as a community college, right, you have to be, we have to be accessible enough for people to come in so many doors. It's not just one door to earn a credential from us. And so I really credit the academic affairs, the associate provost and the former provost to work and build that relationship to help the faculty make that determination where they are comfortable with. Yeah, because we do it with credit for prior learning with other things, right? If you have this certification, this is the academic credit that we'll give you. So I really credit them to kind of collaborate, partner with faculty on this to be able to have a crosswalk or certification so that there can be a pathway for someone who, hey, you get this credit after this series of micro-credentials. And our hope is that they will continue on in their studies to earn their associate's degree, because those are things that can be life-changing.
Absolutely. And one small question, just because, like we talk about with credential confusion, words matter. You mentioned, the word pathways. Is that an internal term that has specific definition at Ivy Tech, or are you kind of thinking just more broadly what we think of when we are talking about and reading about, learning mobility?
Sure. I don't know that we've defined it specifically here at Ivy Tech, but I think there's just a lot of different on-ramps that students can be admitted between dual credit, uh, obviously the workforce side of the house, and then just through the traditional academic credit. So I don't know that we have something in terms that we've called it as a you know a branded thing that we refer to internally. We do think about stackability, though, of that is a term that we've tried to talk about, like as you earn a certificate that can build to a technical certificate, which can hopefully then lead on to an associate's degree. And so, I mean, the micro-credential could be part of that stackability. Um, again, for the credit for prior learning certification crosswalk to academic credit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you answering that, because I know you mentioned your vendor, and I know they have a pathway tool. So that was, I just want to make sure we weren't missing out on specific understanding there. And I guess we should also, since you brought up credential mobility, we should hype that ACRAO does have a brand new ebook out that people could head over to the ACRAO website, and it's free for members to download. I think there's about 17 chapters all about learning mobility in there. So definitely encourage people to check that out. And Chris, as we, kind of have time for just maybe one more question here, you just seem so calm and put together, around a topic of, I think a lot of ACRO members, when they hear build a plane while flying, is their worst nightmare and is the type of stuff that makes them start going and, looking at job postings. And so, as you're just calm and cool and collected about this process, are there any lessons learned that you can offer, to anybody who's watching this around, either best practices you picked up on, or, a bruise or a scrape that you can warn us about so we can avoid getting hurt?
Sure. Um, no, I appreciate that. And I think maybe that just comes from most of my career in higher education has been as a registrar. So uh, it's kind of, even though it's newer territory, for me, it's, change is always the name of the game. I kind of joke, there's three certainties in life: death, taxes, and change. Um, and so just how we adapt to that. But I think for me, just stepping into this, I really just appreciate people's willingness to share what works for them and how they've handled it as an input person. Um, because there's not really like a standards body of this is what you need to do for a micro-credential. But I think even just wearing my registrar hat, because one of the things that I kind of got tripped on was like, should we transcript this or not? Right. But I think just through input and putting questions on the exchange, the credential, innovative credentials, I believe is the exchange group, people just sharing again how they've handled it. And I think you have to do what makes sense for your institution, but also for what you're comfortable with. And the old adage, even though this is a newer credential, what shows up on the transcript? It's learning things that people have achieved and so forth. And so we've handled that as just more of a transcript comment at this point, rather than issuing it like we would issue a degree and other certificates in that part of our transcript. So like for me, that was just one thing. Is like, okay, I feel comfortable with that because ultimately I think, and sorry, this is maybe going down to maybe a little bit of a rabbit hole, but coming off the SIS summit that we had right before the tech and transfer meeting, um, one of the things that we talked about with vendors or the issues like what do people show if people who have like a wallet or a micro-credential, if they show that to somebody, how would you ingest that? How would people make sense of it? And for us, the deans and faculty are the ones who make that crosswalk that would say, hey, we will give you this academic credit based on this certification, but they need artifacts or whatever the departments need. And I'd imagine that they're probably not ready yet for show me your micro-credential, show me your badge, to be able to have that. They're probably going to be a bit more, what, let me run your transcript. And if that notation's there that shows that they completed the series or whatever, that's probably what they're going to be most comfortable with in terms of awarding the, verified credit is what we call it, or credit for prior learning. So that was maybe a long way to explain at least how I landed, at least in terms of transcripting it, because there are institutions that say, no, we don't put it on the transcript at all. But I think ultimately you have to do what's best for like kind of your situation, your institution, and kind of the tolerance level for what people are willing to accept at this point.
Well, and I think your advice to people there is, is profound. That, I came to you naturally as an input person to before, right? You're feeling a little anxiety about this question, but let me ask some more questions. Be curious, I guess, would be the to ask questions, and that by asking questions and seeking out more information, you quickly landed in a place that was absolutely within your realm of comfort, even though, on the surface, it was something that, made your registrar brain very uncomfortable out of the gate. And so I think that is just profound advice. And I appreciate you taking time to share with us. He is Chris Huang. He is the Vice President for Academic Systems and Completion Strategy at Ivy Tech Community College. Chris, thank you so much for being with us. This is really great, man.
Great. Thank you. Glad I could help or hope I'm helpful.
Absolutely. And thank you for being here. And thank you for watching and joining us on AACRAO's Credential Chats. Have a badge-worthy week, everybody.